Take it away.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon from our side. I just have to say I'm definitely not winning a Oscar with that performance. But anyways, hopefully the information was clear. It's always interesting to listen to the videos and hear the wind in the background, because that gives you a clear indication of the sort of conditions that we face on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, thanks for signing in and listening. I'm going to take you through 3 of our wines today. Some of you have tasted some of these wines before, and if you remember that short clip while I was sitting at the dam, I was talking about the 2016 vintage and how severe it was and how difficult the vintage was. So I'm going to take you through 3 of our wines. All 3 of them are the 2016 vintage. So we're going to be tasting Kleinboet 2016 first. Kleinboet 2016, which is our baby Bordeaux. Kleinboet is the Afrikaans word for baby brother. And why the baby brother? We create this wine. It's a friendlier and a lighter expression of Bordeaux. The wine is dominated by Cabernet, or this particular vintage is dominated by Cabernet, so you're looking at about 40%, and then quite a big percentage of Malbec. We just find, like I said in the video as well, that Malbec really works well. It gives us nice, juicy, ripe, lush flavors without giving us too much tannin. And nice acidity as well, especially for, because we age our wines for quite a long time before we release them. So Malbec is becoming a more and more important varietal for us in our wines, and especially so in 2016, that was a very, very tough vintage. Like I mentioned, we had a lot of rain during that vintage, so the profile of this particular wine is much more red fruit spectrum. I actually have a glass in front of me, so let me not lie to you. Yeah, well, there you have, a lot of fresh fruit, fresh red fruit, sour cherry, and those sort of flavors. The wine only has 13.5% alcohol on the label. This particular wine, like I mentioned, Cabernet driven, and then Malbec. Malbec is about 20%, and then the rest is made up of Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, and Merlot. It's a very small percentage of Merlot in this particular vintage. And then important to remember that this wine sees no small barrels or no new oak. It only goes into the big wooden vats, the 6,000 liter wooden vats, for 24 months, which is quite a long time. And the reason for that is we like because the site is so specific and the site is so expressive, the wine needs time. So all our wines mature for quite a long time. This one for 24 months in those big wooden vats, and then for another 12 months in the bottle before we release the wine. And so what you will find that, the integration of the different varietals are so closely knit together. And something that I should also mention, and some of you might know that, is that the way we produce our blends, we ferment all the varietals separately. So the Cabernet, the Merlot, the Malbec, Petit Verdot, and Cabernet Franc, all fermented separately. And then we go through malolactic fermentation. And then after the blend, or after the fermentation, we make the blend. So the blend then goes into the vats and mature for 24 months as a blend. Where most cellars will keep the varietals separate for the maturation in oak period and then only blend afterwards. And we just find that the marriage of the varietals are so much more closer and closer knit, and hence you find that sort of European sophistication and balance and elegance and freshness, which characterizes our wine. So that's the 2016 Kleinboet. Next up, what we're gonna be tasting is Arnoldus 2016. So Arnoldus 2016, this is our flagship wine. Blend also all 5 varietals from Bordeaux, but this is dominated by Cabernet with a bigger percentage of Cabernet. We're talking about 55 to 60% of Cabernet, and then importantly, a bigger percentage of Merlot than compared to the Kleinboet. So Arnoldus is the big brother, or the big Bordeaux as we refer to. And interesting about this vintage is 12.5% alcohol on the label. It's a wine that spent 2 years in brand new French oak. So 24 months in French oak, and then more importantly, 24 months in the bottle before the wine was released. So we've recently launched this wine. And what I love about the wine is you can imagine a Bordeaux blend from South Africa, and you turn the bottle around, you see 12.5% alcohol on the label, you'll think, well, you know, what type of wimpy wine is this? But what I love about it, it is such a true and pure expression of what Sondagskloof and our appellation is all about. Despite the fact that the wine has such low alcohol, the wine has incredible concentration, layers, length, and a lot of people that have tasted this wine with me, and a lot of people that have, even winemakers and people that claim to be wine experts, I always do a bit of a party trick, and I ask them, well, taste the wine and, you know, just give me an indication stylistically. Do you think it's a riper style, or do you think it's sort of somewhere down the middle, or sort of a fresher style? And without fail, they all put the wine in a more riper, serious category. And then I turn the bottle around and say, well, it's only 12.5% alcohol. And people are just absolutely blown away by this. And that is just what I love about Sondagskloof is, you know, it can give you wines like this that completely just blow people out of the water. Like I've mentioned, muted here. Can
Sorry,
you guys hear me?
Not sure what happened there, bud.
All right. I thought you were tired of listening to my voice. So yeah, just to recap, so it's 24 months in brand new French oak and 24 months in the bottle. And I believe that, you know, that time that the varietals have to marry together, you know, with the expression of sight is what makes that wine truly fantastic. And what I'm very excited about that particular vintage is to see how the wine aged. All our wines have an incredible capacity to age because they have high levels of natural acidity. We don't have to acidify our wines, obviously, with such a cool climate. And, you know, because it's a natural acidity and the wines age for such a long time in oak and in the bottle, you know, you don't sense the harshness of acid in any way, but it does give you that lingering fresh sensation, which gives the wine an incredible drinkability. So that's the Arnoldus 2016. What is quite surprising about it is, even though 12.5% alcohol has a lot of spice, has a lot of dark, broody fruit, wish I could be tasting this wine with you. Hopefully we will be tasting it together soon. But yeah, this is really something that excites me. Probably, again, coming back to the vintage, reminding you 2016 was probably the most difficult vintage I've ever faced in my 20-year winemaking career, because every time we wanted to pick the grapes, then it would rain. Then we wait for 2-3 days, sunshine, wait for, you know, we don't want all the rain that's in the plant to be absorbed in the berries. And then just when we want to harvest, then it would rain again. So it was like intermittent, 2 days rain, 3 days sunshine, 3 days rain, and that went on for about 3 weeks. And then we made the decision, you know, we need to pick these grapes. And yeah, even in the cellar, you know, you can imagine putting a South African Bordeaux blend at 12.5% alcohol in brand new French oak barrels. For me was, I didn't sleep for the first 3, 4, 5 months. And I kept on tasting the wine just to see. And eventually the wine just grew into this perfectly balanced Bordeaux blend with 12.5% alcohol. It's one of those mysteries, but it is an absolute pillar of a wine. So that's Arnoldus 2016. And then last but certainly not least, is one of my favorite wines to work with, or favorite varietals to work with. This is our Swartkop 2016. This is our 100% Cabernet Franc. And Cabernet Franc, just for me personally, it poses such a challenge, especially with South African growing conditions. A lot of people will say they don't want to work with Cabernet Franc because out of 10 years, you might get 3 good vintages and the other 7 vintages are all over the show. And we just find that Sondagskloof and Cabernet Franc just work together. The vineyard is basically planted in the middle of the property, halfway up the slope of the middle of the 3 slopes. Nice granitic soils with a little bit of that clay at the bottom. And it's incredible the concentration that you find on this wine. Again, 2016, 13.5% alcohol on the label. This is a wine that spent 18 months in small barrels. Half of those barrels are new French oak, and the other half is second and third full French oak barrels. And then after the 18 months in the barrel, the wine spends another 18 months in the bottle. And for me, this is such a pure expression of Cabernet Franc. You get that dusty, wet forest, dusty road, wet forest floor. You know, I'm not going to say mushrooms because then people freak out. But you also have, and this is what I love to talk about, is the good green in Cabernet Franc. You know, a lot of people don't like working with Cabernet Franc, especially South African winemakers, because they get freaked out about that sort of fine layer of greener fruit that you sometimes find in Cabernet Franc. But that is the varietal. And if you need to know how to manage that, and you need to know how to incorporate that in the wine, because it then gives a perception of freshness, both aromatically, but also the perception on the palate. And that is what I find with our Cabernet Francs from Sonnerskloof is there's a lot of spice, there's a lot of, you know, good green. I know it freaks people out, so don't be freaked out when I say good green. And when I come to America, please challenge me on the good green. I would love to have that conversation with you. And so, yeah, this is for me, when we talk about site specificity and when we talk about an expression of site, the Swartskap and the Cabernet Franc, for me, is what personifies Sonnerskloof. Concentration, elegance, just the purity of fruit that I almost want to say is very hard to find anywhere else in South Africa. So, cheers. Jess, I don't know if we have any questions.
Hey, Bill, would you like me to show the maps that you sent?
Yeah, you can. Let's have a look. Well, you know what? Actually, I don't know. It's not necessary.
Okay.
I don't think it's necessary.
Okay, I'll put them in the upload.
Okay.
Yep. I think it's fantastic. I really enjoy their wines in the restraint that they have. I mean, if you look at our entire portfolio, out of 100 SKUs, there's only two wines that exceed 14% alcohol. So I feel like on a minute level, there's been a shift going back towards more honest old world style productions. So it's definitely a breath of fresh air.
If I can comment on that, I mean, obviously, we have a very much a sort of a European approach in our winemaking. We're definitely not minimal interventionists. You know, we intervene when it's necessary. But for me, it's the key and the focus is the expression of sight. And I mean, you've used the word, so I'm gonna just, you know, use it again. Is you know, restraint and tension and, you know, just the good use of oak to create that sort of tension is something that we really that we really pride ourselves on. If you go to all the good cellars and all the first growths and cellars in Bordeaux with rapport, and you speak to the winemakers and the cellar masters, they all refer to the oak that they use and the good barrels and the regimes that they have. And I think that's something that we've worked on very hard. Well, we've worked on at HPF for the last 6 years, and there's a very strong focus to buying more expensive oak, to buy good oak, rather than just buying a lot of barrels, you know, that are average. And we've seen how that has improved our wine over the last 6 years immensely. And I think a good Bordeaux is a wine that shows that tension and then shows that restraint. And unfortunately, a lot of New World wines and New World Bordeaux, you know, in my personal opinion, lacks that restraint. And for us, it's nice to work with an appellation and a site that you know, just sort of enhances that style.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you mind just touching briefly on Sauvignon Blanc?
Yeah, sure.
We've got some product in hand now, and our intentions are to carry that going forward. We are getting out of white wine season, but we're kind of approaching it as like a short, like a soft launch with the Sauvignon Blanc. So everybody's familiar with it in the springtime here and around April. But the biggest thing is we've got your Sauvignon Blanc now at a much more competitive price point, where it was over that $20 retail. We're now able to get it to $14.99 in that kind of $10 BTG, which is super significant in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, for me, if I've got to choose two wines from our range that express Sonnerskloof the best, I mentioned the Cabernet Franc. I mean, not taking away from all the other varieties. I just think the expression of Sonnaskloof is so pure and is so honest in the Cabernet Franc, and then also in the Sauvignon Blanc. We make two different styles. We make the unwooded style Sauvignon Blanc, which is called the Carlfoot Macy, which translates the barefoot girl. And I think the samples that you have would be the 2019 vintage. We're very close to changing to the 2020 vintage here nationally in South Africa. But just on that particular wine, we've worked quite hard to create wines that are slightly more accessible, because obviously, because we have such a marginalized climate, you tend to find Sauvignon Blancs that are more towards the leaner and the greener style. So we've incorporated three different techniques in the cellar over the last 2-3 vintages to just give the wine a little bit more weight, a little bit more mouthfeel without losing the freshness, and also changing the fruit profile from, you know, being slightly more leaner and greener to being, you know, slightly more sunshine, yellow fruit, that sort of profile. The three techniques that we've used, firstly is we've done, you know, a longer lees contact. So after the fermentation, we rack the wine, we keep a small percentage of the fresh lees, the healthy lees, and then we keep the wine for about 6 months, stir it up just to give the wine a little bit more texture. That's the one technique we've used. The second is we've done extended cold maceration of the grapes before the grapes get crushed or before the grapes get pressed. So we crush, destem, and then we keep the grapes in a separator for 2 days at 5 degrees. And basically what that does is it just allows a little bit of chemistry to happen between the slow extracting juice and the skins, which gives the wine just, again, a little bit more texture and mouthfeel, not masking the acidity, but just enhancing the freshness and toning down the acidity. And then the third aspect, which I have a lot of winemakers sort of frown, and I just giggle, because I have a background of working with sparkling wine and champagne. I know the value of good reserve wine. And so we've started a reserve wine program at HPF. So I incorporate about 7 to 10% of reserve wine in every vintage. That also just gives the wine a broader perspective, you know, just gets the wine ready for market just slightly sooner. And it is amazing over the last 3 vintages since we've incorporated these techniques, how, you know, just easy, you know, quaffing, everyday Sauvignon Blanc just all of a sudden has a lot more personality and a lot more texture and structure. Which takes me to one of my favorite wines is the wooded Sauvignon Blanc. This is where we do very specific block selection. We look at the vintage to determine which block is slightly more ripe, slightly riper than some of the other blocks. Because we've got such a marginalized climate, the blocks are very, you know, the one year it might be block 6, the next year it might be block 12. So we've got to keep a close eye as the vintage progresses, and then we pick the best Sauvignon Blanc for the wooded Sauvignon. And then the juice is then placed in 500-liter barrels, older oak. There's about 10% new oak in there. And then the wines ferment and mature in the wooden barrels, the 500 liters, for about 10 to 12 months. Very little interference, no batonnage or stirring or anything. We just leave the wine there. And then we incorporate about, again, 7 to 10% of Semillon just to build, again, that mid-palate. And for me, the wooded Sauvignon is one of the sexiest wines on the planet. I think the category in itself, I mean, people might know the old Blanc Fumé category, which has a bit of a sort of an old man's connotation to it. But if you drink good Blanc Fumé or wooded Sauvignon Blancs or even Bordeaux Blanc, it's some of the most exquisite wines that you will drink on the planet. Wines with, you know, wines with freshness, wines with texture, wines with length, wines that leave you with that sort of salivating minerality in your palate, wines that you can drink winter, summer, with food, without food. It's just, for me, absolutely fantastic to work with those, with barrel fermented Sauvignons. And then obviously we've got the straight Semillon as well that we sell in your neck of the woods. But yeah, we don't have time to talk about that, so we'll just have to taste it when I'm over there.
Any questions out there? Fire away. If you, yeah, I think we're doing okay on time. If you want to touch quickly on, I was going to ask you to touch quickly on the blouse
Yes.
and the Semillon.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so Blues is our dry style rosé. Um, Again, I mean, like I mentioned in the video, our focus is very much on Bordeaux varietals. The reason for that is just I find that Bordeaux varietals, the expression of Bordeaux varietals in Sonnas Kloof is so European, it's so refined, it's so pure that we basically use Bordeaux varietals for everything. So the Blues is our dry style rosé. And here it's two aspects that are very important. So 90 to 95% of this rosé is pressage, which means that the grapes are farmed for rosé. A lot of rosés in South Africa is just a byproduct of a red wine process. So either by bleeding or, you know, it's a vineyard that didn't perform well. So the red wine grapes got used for the rosé that year. But for us, it's a focused product. So we've got vineyards allocated for this wine in particular. So 95% pressage and then about 5% or the balance is then Saunier, which basically means a little bit of the juice that we bleed off when we make the red wines. If the quality is good enough and it's not too tannic and not too harsh and not too dark, we can then incorporate that into the Blues, which is if you look at the color, it's more sort of the orange, lighter style, more or color of hue, more Provençal. And what I love about this wine in particular is that, you know, because you use Bordeaux varietals and because you use varietals like Cabernet and Cabernet Franc, you actually find that the wine is very light and very elegant. But then on the palate, there's just like a aspect of seriousness, which just puts the wine in a different category. So it's again a wine that you can sit outside during the summer and you can just enjoy, drink the wine. But there's for the finer taster, there's an aspect of seriousness in this wine, which is very, very interesting. And so yeah, that's our dry style rosé. And then Semillon, which is called Witbroodjie, which means the class favorite or the favorite. Semillon is my personal favorite white wine varietal because I just think it's so versatile. And I think the expression of that varietal is, again, purity is something that we at HPF love in our wines. And because it expresses sight, it speaks of a specific place. And the Semillon is definitely one of those varietals. This is a wine, again, that we ferment in barrel, age in barrel. This year, quite interestingly, I've experimented. I've made a bit of an orange wine. So all spontaneous ferment, no additives, fermented on the skins. And hopefully that will be the next vintage that you will taste. It's a very interesting wine. I remember when I was out there, everybody saying the Semillon tastes like jalapeno juice. I can promise you that the 2020 is definitely living up to that reputation. But the wine just has, again, even more purity than the previous vintage. So I like to experiment with Semillon. I think it's, again, like I mentioned, it's so versatile, either by itself or using it with the wooded Sauvignon Blanc. So yeah, it's something to look out for.
Excellent.
So Willem,
yeah, go ahead, John.
I have a couple of questions. Willem, good to see you.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Okay, so the Sauvignon Blanc we tasted last year with you.
Yes.
Was that wood aged?
Yes, that would have been wood aged. Yes,
yeah,
that's correct.
Yeah, I gave it just a great score, so I'd be looking forward to that for sure. The
Yeah.
second one is that given that 2016 was that rainy but other people drought year,
Yeah.
is it fairly consistent year after year for you where the vineyards are? You know, in terms of wine and outcome, or is there a big variation?
It's actually the opposite. I mean, if I look at the last 5, 6, 7 vintages, and it's weird. For us, the odd years are the wet years, and the even years. The even years are the wet years, and the odd years are the dry years. So 14 very wet, 16 very wet, 18 very wet, 20 very wet, 15, 17, 19 moderate to dry years. Those are the last 7 vintages without fail. So what we do find, those 14 and 16 were it was like stormy rain, where 18 and 20 it was more sort of persistent rains, so slightly easier to manage. So from my perspective, I'm trying to manage it and anticipate the vintage, you know, based on the last 7 years. And even if you go back to 13 and 12 and 11 and 10, it's consistent. And it's on the one hand, it makes it very difficult to manage. But I mean, myself and the viticulturist, we always make the joke, you know, we anticipate the season, we put the perfect plan in place, and then within the first 2-3 weeks, Mother Nature just smiles at us and changes everything. So sometimes it's rain, sometimes it's wind, sometimes it's just the expectation of certain blocks to do better. They don't perform well, and so it's a you know, how can I say, it's almost like on the volley. You've got to anticipate week on week. Anything can happen because we're so far south and so exposed to both oceans, Atlantic and Indian Ocean. You know, anything can happen. So we've got to be prepared for that. But you know what? On the other hand, I actually did a vertical tasting of Kleinboet Arnoldus and Swartkop yesterday, going back to vintage 2012, and it's incredible to see how well we have managed, even in difficult vintages like 12. Like 14, like 16. And I mean, having these wines in front of me and tasting them, and also having other people taste them, knowing how severe 16 was, you know, is quite, yeah, quite satisfying.
Wow. So also, because you get a lot of wind there, when you do get rain, does that help like dry them off quickly so you can harvest when it gets late in the year?
Yeah, the challenging part with that's the interesting part of Sonnaskloof. We get the wind when we don't want it, and then when we do want it, we don't get it. And it's the same with the rain. We get the rain when we don't want it, and then when we do want it, we don't get it. But we've now learned over the last 5, 6, 7 years how to manage and how to anticipate. We find a lot of rain pre-season, sort of, you know, during flowering, which is obviously absolutely catastrophic. Wind during flowering is absolutely, because, you know, half your crop just blows, you know, into the nowhere and into the ocean. So we get a lot of wind October, November, early December, which is very bad for us. And then during the growing season, when we do have the rains, we don't have the winds that we need to sort of, you know, give that sort of refreshing, you know, blow all the moist out of the vineyard. So we always have, year on year, whether it's dry or whether it's wet, we always have, you know, high percentage or high risk of disease, and especially rot. So it's a very good question, because what we've done is because we've anticipated that over the last 2-3 vintages, we have also you know, adopted our viticultural practices. So we farm much more open. The canopy is much more open because we don't have that extreme heat like you do in the rest of the Western Cape. We can break the canopy wide open without having, you know, the threat of having sunburn on the berries, or, you know, cooking the grapes. And interestingly enough, that trying to fix one problem has presented an opportunity for us to change the style of the Sauvignon Blanc, for example. You know, so getting more sunshine into the bunches, slightly more yellow fruit profile. So, you know, I think it comes down to attitude, having the right attitude, and not saying, well, it's terrible, we get wind and we get rain, and to see what you can do, manage it. And, you know, sometimes when you manage something, it presents an opportunity to do something better. So that's exactly where we are at the moment.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Good morning, Will. I have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
So, you know, pandemic has been really hard on us. And previously, when we had all of our restaurants open, like, I mean, a lot of our business personally in Minnesota was restaurant, and having worked on the floor as a somm, you can see a wine, see a price, and it's a lot easier to sell to a customer. Now that most of our business is on premise or off premise retail, a customer may walk in and they're usually shopping on their own, but they may walk in and see a wine, a price, and they're usually looking for points now. Points have become very important. So I'm just wondering if you have any points and press behind your wines.
Yeah, that is one of our greatest challenges. Is as a brand, we've taken the stand, not to enter competitions, not to do ratings. So we're fully aware that that is a barrier to entry for us as a wine from South Africa. Obviously having Afrikaans on the label, and so we're working on one or two strategies. We have discussed maybe translating the labels. We have discussed maybe putting one or two key indicators to help the consumer. So something that we've done, for example, where in the past you just had Hermanus Pietersfontein and the name of the wine. Now we've also put varietals on the label, and what we've seen in the national market is that has helped a lot of people that are not necessarily familiar with the brand to reach out and grab the bottle. But it is something that we're reviewing, especially for the international market. But then we also want to be specific and say, well, it's pointless for me to enter Tim Atkin and get 93 points Tim Atkin when nobody in America or the consumer in America knows who Tim Atkin is, but they might know Decanter or they might know Wine Spectator. So, that's something that I mean, we're actually, not expecting, but, looking towards people like yourselves to say, well, we find that this will help. If that's the case, then we will put our wines forward for ratings if that's going to help the US market. I don't know if that makes sense.
Do you find that like apoptosis in your wines ever helps sell?
Sorry.
I think Emily's getting after you, Willem.
No, it's fine.
He doesn't get it at all.
It's somebody's. I've got to earn my salary here, so it's fine. She can have a go as much as she wants.
No, I appreciate.
But just repeat the question.
I said, do you ever find that apoptosis ever helps develop your wines any further?
I don't know what apoptosis means. Not today.
Oh. Do us.
No, I think that was a bit of a setup, Bill Ellen, but in all honesty, like I appreciate the fact that they're not score chasing, because it is such a sideshow nowadays, and it probably always has been. So that's not accurate, but I mean, we send stuff to reviewers and you look at what they do give scores on, and it's all the big names with the biggest pockets, and then they give other wines that have been around for a very long time and tried and true, but maybe don't have as big of a name. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And thankfully, I think nowadays most people just really don't pay attention to it, because they can open up a magazine and see a 99 score from anything. So a lot of score inflation these days. Yeah.
Uncle Bob gave one of. Yeah, there we go. I think. I'm not ignorant, and I'm not aggressive and saying no. I just believe that you've got to do it for the right reason. And I'm still not convinced that maybe it's different in some markets over there. But what I firmly believe, and it's a conversation that we've had often, is I believe in, especially because we're a small producer, I believe in organic growth. I believe in honesty, and I would like people to connect with the brand and buy the wines and enjoy the wines and come back and say, well, that was honest. That was an honest wine. Instead of somebody putting a score in their face and they're buying it and they're disappointed with what they've received just because somebody else thought it was a good wine. But I mean, it's an ongoing argument and conversation. I think every brand needs to decide for themselves what they want to do. That's our standpoint, but we're not, we are, if that's what needs to be done, then, we can put it on the table and discuss it again, I guess.
Excellent. Well, if anyone else has any questions, fire away. We're loaded up on the Merlot, the Postmeister, and we've got a current deal that we're running through the end of the year. And then I'm also excited to get we now have their Sauvignon Blanc in, and just with, Will Ellen's description of the work that they put behind the the vineyard and the winery process to make the Sauvignon Blanc. You know, a lot of folks out there nowadays, they harvest, crush, bottle, and it's on the shelf within like a 3-4 month period. And this is, you know, the Sauvignon Blancs that we're bringing in from Johann and Villelum and also Oak Valley are 3 completely different style Sauvignon Blancs, but are all they're all seriously made and competitively priced. So yeah, I'm excited to get started with those, and the things like Schwarzkopf and Arnaldus that are much higher price points. There's, you know, we have the select customers for those, but I'm really looking forward to Postmeester and then also the Sauvignon Blanc going forward for more of an everyday basis. We're in that BTG range and under $20 retail. 15 on the Sauvignon Blanc and about 18 on the Merlot. So I think those are very, very good offerings. But yeah, again, want to say thanks, Phil Ellum. I thought it was great. Sure. Yep. If anybody else has a question, fire away. Otherwise, we will sign off and see you tomorrow. All right, cool, guys. Well, thanks again for
everybody.
And yep, have a good rest of your day. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Jess. Thank you.
Cheers,
yeah,
guys.
thank you guys so much.
See you, Will.
Great to see you, Wilhelm.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank
Take
you.
care, everybody.
Bye.